Herzlich willkommen allerseits zu 99:1, unserem nächsten Interview. Heute wollen wir mit Amandeep Sandhu sprechen über die Bauernproteste, die schon seit Monaten in Indien stattfinden. In der letzten Folge hatten wir darüber auch schon gesprochen und heute wollen wir uns dann erste Handinformationen holen. Wie ihr wisst, bei diesen internationalen Interviews, die wir führen zu internationalen Themen, ist es dann öfter so, dass wir die Interviews halt auch in Englisch führen müssen. Das heißt, ich hoffe, dass ihr mitkommt, und wenn ihr nicht mitkommen solltet, werden wir die nächsten Tage dann dafür sorgen, dass Untertitel bereitstehen, zumindest automatisch generierte Untertitel. Außerdem ist es möglich für euch, dass ihr euch in den Chat sowohl auf Facebook als auch auf YouTube einklingt und Fragen stellt. Und wenn die Fragen einigermaßen passen zu dem, was wir besprechen wollen, werde ich sie dann auch an Amandeep stellen und er kann die dann beantworten. Gut, dann holen wir mal Amandeep hinzu und ich fange jetzt auch dann an, auf Englisch zu sprechen. Amandeep, my friend, how are you?
Thank you so much for calling me here. I loved hearing German. It was after a long time.
Yes, you actually were in Germany for 2 years. I saw in your bio,
Yes.
no? Yeah, in
Yes,
Stuttgart.
yes.
Right. Okay, let me give a short introduction to who Amandeep is. Amandeep Sandhu, he was born in Rourkela in Odisha, and he studied at the University of Hyderabad. I hope I said that more or less correctly, yes, the pronunciation. Amandeep is an author of books. He wrote 2 novels. One is called Sepia Leaves in 2008, and another is called Roll of Honor in 2012. And he also was nominated for the Hindu Prize in 2013 for the second book. In late 2019, he published a non-fiction book, basically a memoir or a reportage of his travels to the Punjabi area, and it's called Punjab Journeys Through Fault Lines. Really amazing book. It's also available on German Amazon, German bookstores. You should really check it out. And I think you also were nominated for an award in 2020, at least shortlisted and longlisted for another, Nif Kamalal Devi Chattopadhyay Award 2020. You were longlisted for that one and shortlisted for the Atagalata BLF Nonfiction Prize in 2020. His recent ebook on India's mental health during Corona, during the COVID times, during the COVID outbreak, is available at Amazon. Check out, like if you are in Germany, check out Amazon.com. You're able to get the ebook there. I didn't find it at Amazon Germany, actually, Aman. He is writing various essays, short stories, and he's also writing for journalist newspapers or online newspapers like Caravan, The Scroll, the Hindu Business Line. And the reason why we have him here today is because he has actually been chronicling the farmers' protests that have been ongoing since the end of last year, since October, November last year. He was also there himself. He is in constant contact there, and under his website, www.amandusandhu.com, you can find regular reports from him, and this is why we wanted to have him here and talk about exactly these protests. So, Amandu, did I miss anything?
Aman is just fine.
Aman, okay.
Yeah.
So, right. So let's start. Let's get a little bit into this. So before we go into the farmers' protest right away, I would like for you to maybe paint a little bit of a picture of what kind of India we are looking at in 2020. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about, for people that don't know much about India's politics, what party is in power, what are the main opposition forces there? How is the economical and societal situation also during COVID? What kind of India are we looking at the mid of or end of last year?
Thank you. That's a very thoughtful question to start with, because we need to paint the larger picture. The India we are looking at is a huge youth demographic, one of the biggest youth populations anywhere in the world. It is anyway a very large country, not in terms of space, but in terms of people. 1/5 of the world lives in India. It is also a very aspirational society, because youth wants jobs, youth wants a better life. It is also a society which is in transition between a very state-centered way of living towards a more neoliberal approach of whether it is entrepreneurship or it is other ways of livelihood. But frankly, it hasn't done too well with neoliberalism in the last 30 years. And in the last 7 years, a particular right-wing party made a huge drama about bringing good days to India. They called it Achhe Din, and they came to power with overwhelming majority. People were bored of the previous party, the Congress. There were many allegations against it. So there was a great surge of hope when we thought that, okay, this new party has come into place. At the same time, there was, because it is right-wing, it is Hindu nationalism. Their aim is to create the country into a secular, democratic country, into what is called a Hindu Rashtra, a Hindu nation. So the minorities, whether they are Muslims or Sikhs or tribals, Christians, women, Indian society is also very caste-based. The Dalits, the Bahujan population, they all felt apprehensive as well that what would happen. The particular leader we had did not have a great track record in secularism. So we watched with bated breath, when would the good days come? And the good days have never come. It has been 7 years. One of the big things the government did, and when we talk about Corona, we need to sketch 2 or 3 big events that happened before that. Was in 2016 November, there was countrywide demonetization of our currency. 85% of our currency became redundant suddenly. It broke the back of India's poor. The next year, there was the goods and service tax, which was supposedly a great central project, ended up becoming a copper and broke the back of the trader class. Then last year, there was the abrogation of, not last year now, in 2019, August, abrogation of Article 370 and 335A in Kashmir, Kashmir has been a contested area.
Yeah.
It had a special status, a status which is available to many other states as well. But it was withdrawn from here. The people were put under blackout, huge military presence, major curtailment of freedoms. And the people of Kashmir just braved it, completely confused of what tomorrow would look like. After that, last year, again, 2019 end, they brought in a citizenship bill, which basically snatches our right of birth, I mean, how many of us really have to prove our nationhood? We were born here, we are Indians, and but that was questioned. It was targeted against the Muslim community in particular. There was a national register of citizenship being created. There were huge protests, but then coronavirus pandemic struck. And under the cover of the pandemic, first the government very brazenly, again in its Hindu Rashtra terms, announced that, in 21 days we will conquer this pandemic, and brought the whole country under lockdown with no provisions, no adjustments being made to how would people live, through the lockdown. And we must realize India is also vastly poor country. There is huge migration of labor from villages to cities. Mm-hmm. About 300 million labor was forced to walk back on their feet to their villages. Mm-hmm. It was inhuman, to say the least. And then under the same cover of the same pandemic, they brought out these farm laws, which affect more than 50% of India's population. So basically, in short, it is that this government, on which everybody had great hope, some had apprehensions, has proven itself to be following a completely different agenda, which agenda of the big corporations to divest people of their rights and livelihood, and just help the big corporations become richer.
So, I mean, you already started talking about the farm laws. So what we are seeing now is huge protests and countrywide protests against a set of laws that were kind of snuck through in September of last year. Can you tell us a little bit about these laws? What, or maybe we pull it the other way. What are the protesters actually protesting against? Why are they on the streets? What are they protesting for? What are their demands? And what are we looking at here?
Yeah, so first of all, as I said, under the cover of pandemic, but even worse than that, they were bulldozed through the parliament with no debate or discussion. A special session was held. The opposition was protesting outside the upper house, the Rajya Sabha, and the government just did a voice vote and passed the 3 laws. The laws in specific... And
just to be clear about that, I think that is not normal procedure in India as far as
not at all,
correct?
No.
Yeah.
Any law that has to be passed has to go through the lower house and the upper house. There has to be due debate and discussion. There has to be processing of all the topics that are arising. There has to be a parliamentary committee which looks into it, redrafts the law. So there is a regular democratic process. But this time, just they created a high-power committee a year back, and nobody heard what happened to that committee. And suddenly, in the midst of the pandemic, they brought this law, completely wrongly assuming that there would be no resistance. But when the ordinances of the law came 3 months back, at least the farmer unions in Punjab and some in Haryana, which are the 2 northern states, which are also the states of the green revolution of the country, which are the states which have fed the nation for the last 50 years at least. Punjab used to contribute 70% to the central pool of food, and now it still contributes about 40% to it. It's a different matter that India, the government department, which is supposed to store grains, is unable to store them properly. And India is actually 94 on the World Hunger Index out of 117 countries. So child malnutrition is huge in India. Okay, coming back to the laws, there are 3 laws. The first law basically says that until now, there was a government-regulated procurement system of grain. Now, that system was corrupt. That system had structural issues. That system wasn't working as well as it should. Yet, it was the largest public system in place in the world, And farmers were by and large okay with it. They are now saying that we have to create a private procurement system, which what it will do really is that initially the farmers will get better prices here. But in 2-3 years, when the government system fails, then they will reduce the prices and the farmers will get even lesser money than they are now getting. The second is that they're allowing contract farming with big corporations. So we must note that India is, the farmers of India, which are about 100 million, they are small and marginal farmers, which basically means they have less than 1 or 2 hectares of land. They are not doing well. Indian agriculture has been in crisis for the last 50 years. Government after government has neglected it. But now what they're saying is that corporations can enter into contracts with these farmers, and if there is a dispute, if there is something that needs to be resolved, the farmer cannot go to the court.
Okay.
So that is taking away a fundamental right of the citizen.
Yeah.
So that is the big issue with that.
We are talking about a population that is also, I mean, there were reports on how this kind of population is heavily under pressure, as such that the suicide rates in this population also are climbing and at an incredible high level.
Yes, right? We have had 0.3 million suicides in the last 20 years, ever since neoliberalism has started creeping into the agrarian sector, because what I mean by that is that there has been huge foreign direct investment into the agri-businesses. So there are many companies that have come up which collect the raw produce and then package it and sell it at sometimes 3 times, sometimes 7 times, sometimes 20 times the rate at which they have procured it.
Yeah.
So when we the middle class pay for food, that money is not going to the farmer really.
No.
It is the agri-business which is taking it. So that is why there's a crisis in that. So and the farmers cannot go to the court. It is very detrimental, because how will you solve anything then? And there will be many disputes. There have been disputes in few places where it was tried, in Punjab, in Gujarat, in other parts of the country, because corporations look for profit. And when they get a lot of, when they say, okay, now produce this and we will buy it, farmers take their word and they produce it. It takes 6 months to produce something, even potatoes or corn or wheat or rice or whatever,
Yeah.
And then it really depends upon the corporation whether they'll pick it up or not. And if they don't, then the farmer is bottomed out. So there will be disputes and the court is closed. The third, which to me is actually, which takes the issue much beyond farming, is that there was an Essential Commodities Act coming from 1955, which basically put a cap on how much farm produce can a trader or a businessman store. Now they have removed that cap, which means there will be unlimited stockpiling of food grains, which will basically create artificial inflations in the market. And when the government was buying farm produce and was giving it to people, 67% or 2/3 of India was receiving food at subsidized rates. Some food items, not everything, but mostly cereals and some lentils. Now when the government will not procure because its system has collapsed, how will, and the market will be managed by these people who are stockpiling, how will the poor get food? And we have I told you, we have a 2/3 population, 67% population of India is poor. So these are the 3 laws that have come out. They are detrimental to farmers. They are detrimental to anybody associated with agriculture. They are detrimental to the poor people. Instead of the farmers are saying, repeal these laws, they don't work for us. Alongside, they are saying that when the government procures food from us, there is something called a minimum support price. It has remained low for forever. It has remained low. Farmers are saying, even if it is low, give us a guarantee that there will be a minimum support price for us.
Because the laws also were attacking the MSP as an institution, correct? They also tried to get rid of that.
Because it is a convention. It is not a law. It is something that has been going on,
Okay, yeah.
And it is honored. It's a convention which is honored.
Yes.
The private players will play havoc with it, as is already happening for the last 15 years. The APMCs, or these private, these mandis, what we call in India, they have been dismantled in a state called Bihar. And the farmers of Bihar are really suffering. They are unable to sell their things at even basic price that they need, See, when you look at agriculture, you have to look at what is input cost and what is output cost. And they anyway get much lesser than input cost, and they will get even lesser if these laws come into place. That is why MSP is important. So they are saying, legalize MSP, repeal the laws, and legalize MSP.
So we have heard here in the West, and I actually could not trace where this information came from. I think it came from some of the statements of some of the unions, more than 250 unions that were active in these kind of protests in India, that those protests that we saw starting in November were massive. And we heard that maybe something like 250 million people are on the street, while other people claim that this is a wrong number. So what kind of scale are we talking about here? How much is this actually implicating the whole country?
No, that number is not wrong, but that number is related to protests, but it was a number from 25th of November 2020,
yes,
when the trade unions of the country struck work. They said, okay, this day we will put down, we will not work.
A strike, yes, exactly.
Yeah, strike work,
Mm-hmm.
Around 250 million people joined that protest. The farmers' protest started on Constitution Day, 26th of November. So that was the figure of the union protest, but because both are against the government, so they're not really wrong, but they're not accurate as well,
Sure.
So that is what happened to that number. Yeah.
But we are looking at huge numbers of people being mobilized. I mean,
yes, at this moment, the protests have spread across the country. It is no longer a Punjab, Haryana, North India phenomena. It has gone down to, I live in South India. It has come to my state in Karnataka. It has gone to Tamil Nadu. It has gone to Andhra, Odisha, West Bengal, everywhere in the country. There are large-scale protests by farmers because everybody realizes that this government will sell us off. And this is almost the last stand we are taking against the arrogance of the government, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I want to zoom out 1 second, because you already mentioned about how this is so closely intertwined with neoliberalism and how corporations want to make profit over the situation and the actually deprivation of people in India. We actually observed since years a lot of pressure coming from the WTO, from the World Trade Organization, on India to get rid of institutions or conventions like the MSP and some of those regulations that in the past were there to protect farmers. Can you briefly talk about at least what your perception is, how these things are actually connected? Is the government of India just coming up with this stuff on their own? Are they really just thinking about modernizing and bringing more efficiency into the country, or is there more to this than we see in their statements?
I don't know what these words modernizing and efficiency mean, really. I'll give you the brief on that. The 1986 Uruguay round of the General Trade and Tariff Agreement, General Agreement for Trade and Tariff, which lasted 7 years actually till 93. In that round, it was decided. Many things were decided for countries around the world. Many countries became signatories to it, and that is when they decided that okay, we'll push for neoliberal policies. India has been under pressure to neoliberalize its agrarian system. It tried doing it with education. It failed so badly. It tried doing it with health. It failed so badly. It was realizing that neoliberalism does not work. The previous government was, I wouldn't say it was protective, but it was somehow holding forth that, okay, we'll not do this. Where the previous government failed is that in 2004 to 2007, they instituted a committee called the Swaminathan Committee, which came up with a report at the end of it. It's a big report, 5 volumes, but they made extensive recommendations on what needs to be done to boost India's agrarian space, to end suicides in India. And that government, it is its committee, but it did not implement it.
Mm-hmm.
When this government came in 2014, when they were coming up with their manifesto, they included the terms of reference of that report into their manifesto. And they said, bring us into power and we will implement it. And that is why these millions of farmers voted for that party. But 7 years now, and even they haven't implemented it. In fact, they went to court saying that, oh, this will skew India's markets. It will not skew India's markets. It will rob the agri-businesses from monies which the farmer should get. That would what it will do. So, and now they have come up with this completely bizarre sellout to the large companies, So it is all related to WTO and GATT. What is the issue is that under the cover of GATT and WTO also, this government is basically benefiting those who sponsored its elections, those who put money into the government getting elected, basically those who propped up the government to benefit them. The government is trying to benefit them back. That's what they're doing.
Yeah. Actually, we are going to talk about exactly this dynamic, which we can observe in many countries. In our next episode of 99 zu 1. I want to do something now that I'm personally not so comfortable with, but I have some friends that are, I would say, more to the center or even more to the right of India's political landscape, let's say. And they had made some allegations, and I don't think that those allegations should be brought up, but I think it would be really good if you had some chance to just refute them shortly. So there is this allegation that I also read online of the protest currently being actually co-opted as a means of partisan politics, opposition parties basically trying to use these protests in order to just rage against the current government. What will you say against these kind of allegations? Is there any truth to this? Can we see that, and is that something that we should be concerned with even?
2 or 3 things. When conspiracy theories of this kind come up, they're mostly false because they have no one else to blame, so they go and blame the opposition. The point of these protests is that the farmer unions are against both the Congress, which is the main opposition, much reduced now, and the BJP, which is the party in power. They're also against many other parties, regional parties, who have been promising. The fact is, for 50 years, Indian agriculture has not been attended to. We need to attend to it. And the farmers have been waiting patiently, killing themselves, going under burden of huge loans. In Punjab, I know at least 83% of farmers are under huge debt, which leads to their suicides, actually. So to say that opposition has rigged it up is actually to demean the farmers. They don't even know. They don't even know the resilience, the fortitude, the courage, and the resourcefulness of the farmers. And no political party has that will. In fact, I personally see these protests as a huge churning. And at the same time discrediting all political parties in the country. The system has failed. We have to find representatives who actually represent us and not betray us. And no political party does that. They all betray you. Yes. So these conspiracy theories are very passé. They don't really matter much.
Yes, and it's interesting to know, by the way, that if you observe protests of the like, I mean, not to that scale, and of course not in the same context, but protests against ruling elites in other countries, you hear this kind of claim regularly. And it's interesting that the same kind of weapons are being equipped to try to discredit these kind of movements. We are really interested in how those people on the ground there organize. Because as you said right now, so many of those people are so poor. Probably they won't have regular access to, I don't know, internet, social media. And now we are seeing that they are holding up a protest like this since multiple months already, against also very strong resistance. And I would, maybe you can speak a little bit about how all this is organized. I think the unions are taking a big part in this. What kind of setup of protesters are we looking at ethnically, religiously? Is this more like one stratum of the demography, or are we looking at a broad mix? And maybe last but not least, what do you think the role of caste is in this whole conflict, and how is this interrelated to what we are looking at in the protests?
These are too many questions. Let me just break it down to something which I think we need to mention here. The first thing is that if the government claims that the laws are good, then the farmers are sitting at their doorstep. Why don't they go to the farmers and tell them that they're good? Why are they erecting all these barricades? Why are they putting nails in the ground? Why is concertina wire being used? Why are walls being erected? Why is electricity being cut? Water being cut? Internet being cut? The farmers have come to your door. Go talk to them. But they're not doing that. Second thing is, if the government believes that the laws are good, then why did on December 5th they give concessions which actually vacate the laws? All that the farmers are saying is, if you are willing to give us concessions to vacate the laws, then why don't you just repeal the laws? Because once we go back home, you're going to bring the same amendments back into the laws.
So it's not being trusted, basically, as an honest
move. There is a huge trust deficit. Mm-hmm. Why did they in mid-January says, okay, we will stall the implementation of the laws from 18 to 24 months? The government knows it did wrong. It has been caught, and now it has no escape. Coming down to how it is organized, a couple of things there. Punjab farmers have been on protest since October. Since the laws came out in late September, 24th or 25th, there have been protests on early October. But even before that, major farmer unions, they worked at village level from June onwards, trying to send the message to the people on what is happening. That itself was huge work, and the numbers of villages they contacted go into thousands. The people go into lakhs because it was required to be done on the ground, Then,
and was that centrally organized somehow, or did that just happen decentralized, by different unions that are just acting in their own accordance?
Not acting on their own. There are 31 unions in Punjab. Small unions, big unions, all sorts of unions. They have been on the ground for many years now. They have been protesting against various government policies, various things that are affecting the farming circle. These 31 unions came together as one body, and not when they were evangelizing the horrors of the law, not that time, later on.
Yeah. Okay.
There are two unions which are outside these 31. They also did a lot of work. One of them is actually the largest union. It is called Bharatiya Kisan Union Ekta Ugraham. They did a lot of groundwork. So when they are now here, and then there is 3 years back in a village in Madhya Pradesh in central India, 6 farmers were killed by the police during a protest. That is when a huge umbrella union of these farmer unions was created. That is called the All India Kisan Coordination Committee, which is an umbrella union of 250 unions.
Okay.
So it is those 250 unions, these 33 unions from here, all of them together, all of them, some in tandem, some not in tandem. But right now, during the protests, they all became focused on 4 central issues: repeal the laws, legalize minimum support price. There was electricity ordinance pending. They said, don't bring it on. There was a pollution ordinance pending. They said, don't bring it on. So they have come together on these points, But going back to Punjab in September, October, November, early November, they protested. They closed the railway lines. They opened up the toll plazas on the big highways. They sat in front of privately owned petrol pumps, in front of big silos by these businessmen, malls, and they just jammed Punjab. But the government neglected them. Then in mid-November, when the unions came together, they decided to go to Delhi. And now when they moved to Delhi on 26th November, they were faced by the police of the state, which is between Punjab and Delhi. Now, these two states have had a very fractious relationship with each other in the last 50 years. There have been many issues between them. They both were together, then they were separated, they were, from each other. But that day, the farmers from that state, they came along with the farmers from Punjab. So Haryana and Punjab both moved together, breaking down the government barricades, the police barricades, and then stopping and doing what is the most wonderful aspect of this protest, is conducting community food kitchens for the police.
Wow.
This is a Sikh tradition. This is a tradition of Punjab, the Sikh people of Punjab, that we will serve food. Because the whole fight is about food.
Of course, yes.
So, and they all moved with one tractor and two trolleys. One trolley full of provisions for the next 6 months, 1 year, however long it takes. Another trolley with people in it. And they were again tear gassed and water cannoned outside Delhi. They camped there itself. And they said, okay, we are here now. And they set up their tent cities, so to say. They're living in their trolleys, they're cooking communal food. Everybody who comes there, everybody is served. They're taking care of the neighborhoods in the areas where they have camped. There are many poor everywhere. There are industrial areas. There are all sorts of people. They all come, they all eat. They're running libraries. They're running schools for children. They are basically helping the world around them. And at the same time, steadfast that we will get the laws repealed. It was wonderful. This continued until almost January. Of course, farmers from two other states in what is called Central India or the Himalayan region, the Uttarakhand and UP and Uttar Pradesh, they came and camped in another camp there. And that government there is very draconian. So they escaped not with tractors and trolleys, they escaped on motorcycles and cars and buses. And then there was the middle class of Delhi city, which extended help to them. Set up their tents for them, started these community kitchens for them. The gurdwaras, the Sikh places of worship, came in a big way. So that became the character. There are 3 sites now. There were other sites coming from Rajasthan, coming from a southern to Delhi state called Rajasthan, then from other parts of Haryana. So there were 4 or 5 sites created. Then the message spread across the country. And farmers from other parts of the country started joining it. Not in as big numbers, but 3,000, 5,000 people from. Remember, this was one of the severest winters in many decades.
Okay.
Life on the camp was hard. North Indians are generally accustomed to cold, but then it rained heavily, and the camps were uprooted, and then they came up again, and then they were uprooted, then they came up again. So there's immense resilience here and immense goodwill. And there is also, I must say this, a huge impact of the Sikh religion, which basically believes in the welfare of the world around you. It's not oriented towards itself, it's oriented towards the world. The political character of these unions is socialist oriented, most of them at least. So they're left oriented, but they're not really left, as in they're not Marxist left,
communist or something.
Communist left. No, they're not like that. But they're socialist oriented. But the cadre was mostly Sikhs, and then when the Haryana people came, it was from them. But we all are actually from. This is the tragedy of India, 1947, the partition of India. But we are all from the greater Punjab region, which actually extends into Pakistan as well. So we are one people. We are people of this region. And the support from Uttarakhand and Uttar Pradesh was immense. So, and money, in fact, one of the big worldwide famous charities called the Khalsa Aid, their head came live on social media on day one and said, please do not donate money. We do not need money.
Mm-hmm.
He said, if we need, we'll come back to you. But right now, what we need is material. We need volunteers. We need people to go and take. And this group has not only served seeds, they have served in Syria, they have served in Iraq, they have served the Rohingya Muslims. They have served when there was a temple flood in North India. They have served in Kashmir. They have served in Kerala. So they serve everywhere in the world. But now when it came to this thing, they said, we need material, we need volunteers. When the camps went down because of the rains, a lot of donation came. Not so much in cash again, though mostly middle class kept saying, where should we send cash? Where should we send cash? And that is the irony of it. No, like rural economy is not cash based. Rural economy is materials based. It is based on goodwill. It is based on debts and credits. But urban economy, everybody thinks money is the thing. You just throw money, you pick up whatever you want to pick up. That's not how rural people think.
Yeah.
You asked about the caste factor. It is dominantly a caste protest. It is a protest by what is called the farmer community of India. They're called Jats and Jats and Kisans, and in South India they're called Raita, but they're all that community, the land owning community. Mm-hmm. This community traditionally, not traditionally, in modern ways, you look at them and you say they're very traditional, because they are rigid, there is feudal practices, they are patriarchal, women don't have much space in them. Mm-hmm. But this protest is inverting it, because there are a huge number of women coming and joining.
Yeah, we saw this in many pictures and reports.
So women and children. And women are not only coming to do some langar duty, the community kitchen duty and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Women are managing stages, women are speaking from stages, women are forming groups and taking the message around in other places. So women are very integral to these protests. Mm-hmm. So are what we call the Dalits in India. I hate the reference, the lower caste, but it is that caste which does not have land, which does not have this fight of my land will go away. It doesn't have that. But they also realize what I said earlier, the dilution of the Essential Commodities Act, how it will affect the poor. They also realize that, yes, we have a flawed system right now, but the next system to replace it will be far worse. So we have to stand in solidarity. So similarly, there are other castes like Gujars and Meenas, and they have also joined the protest. The Muslims have started joining the protest recently in the last few weeks. Okay. And so it is becoming a really diverse protest, and its character is as diverse as India.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I would like to give you a little bit of time to maybe talk a little bit about this one picture that went viral and became iconic during the protests. I'm going to show it right now. So seemingly we're seeing someone here, part of the protests, being attacked or being threatened by police or military. I'm not sure. Can you give us some context about this? Because when we spoke before, you gave me a very beautiful and very sad background to this picture that I would like you to share with everyone.
Yeah, so this picture actually is from the day of the breaking of the barricades, 27th of November. This is police, obviously caning an old farmer. But the picture actually echoes something which is very vital to how India has been constructed over the last many decades. In 1965, we had a war with Pakistan. Very unfortunate because we should be fighting Pakistan, two poor nations here. We need development. But at that time, the Prime Minister of India, Lal Bahadur Shastri, came up with this idea that what's called Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, which basically means hail the soldier, hail the farmer. Both are pillars on which we will construct this nation. And it is true. The soldier does his job to defend the country. The farmer also does his job to serve the country. They are the two pillars of the country. Mm-hmm. This idea has remained in Indian consciousness. In fact, among all these protesting farmers, whether they are what we call Jat, Chats, the farmer, and the Dalits, the other castes, there is almost a tradition everywhere that one son will take up farming, one son will go and join the army or the paramilitary or the police. Not that it happens in every family, but the intention is that we will do both these jobs, you know?
Yes, yes.
So there is a bonding between the farmer and the soldier, and the bonding is blood.
Yeah.
What sadly this government has done, and this government, as you now know, has been divisive. It has been religiously divisive, it has been caste divisive, and now it is dividing blood also, because it is pitting the farmer against the soldier. Mm-hmm. This is not a fight anyone wants. Mm-hmm. You know, every village that is participating here receives a dead body every few weeks from the borders. Mm. They're all wrapped in the Indian tricolor. You know, there is huge sentiment involved in that. Many veterans from the armed forces who have fought wars for India in the past, they are sitting on protest right now, you know, because they realize what the government is going to do to their lands. Many who are in the protests have their sons actually on the borders of India, on the Himalayas, you know, serving the country there. This is the saddest aspect of this protest. And this picture sort of epitomizes it, that these two should never be fighting each other. These are the pillars of the country. And this government has made this fight happen.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I mean, maybe it's like two more questions because we're running a bit late. But what I would like you to reflect a little bit on is, what do you think where all this is going? So what's the state right now? What are we looking at? And how do you think this will develop in the next weeks, months? What are we looking at here?
We are looking at a pan-India uprising. The anger has been bubbling up in this country. The aspiration also has been bubbling up among the youth. Everybody is frustrated. There is great discontent. There is anger. There is generational anger against neglect by subsequent governments. There is neglect. There is anger against this government's arrogance in the last few years. This government has basically harvested that anger. Mm. And it's not going to look good for the government at all. In fact, the longer the protests go, the weaker the government gets, the more desperate it gets. It starts, you know, even bigger censorships of people. You know, one aspect of the rallying together, which I missed earlier, was the role that youth and the singers who sing songs played in the protest. You know, there have been a brilliant outpouring of protest music, about 500 songs in three months. You know, and somebody became the bard of the protests. You know? And a few days back, there was news that his most famous song was removed from YouTube.
Ah, okay.
You know, government has instructed Twitter to remove, I think, 1,400 handles from Twitter. Mm-hmm. You know, journalists are being arrested. Just today, one of the good alternative news sites, there have been raids by the tax department on them because they stand with the farmers, you know. Mm. And there have been national security questions being asked and cases filed on various volunteers of the protest. these are ways. There are right now, on 26th January, the government enacted something which they thought would break the protest. It did break the protest. It shifted the focus from this main protest site called Singhu to the Uttarakhand protest site called Ghazipur. The leader there took over. He became important. Though he has said that all of us are important, but there was a shift of balance. So the protest literally moved from Punjab and Haryana into central India. They have gone there now. There are lakhs of people, millions of people gathering for what they call the Mahapanchayats, the big gatherings. And they're taking oaths that they will oppose the BJP government until the laws are repealed. So the government is under immense pressure, or it loses its vote bank subsequently. It's already losing it. On the other side, the government is under pressure from the corporate lobby that has helped it grow.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And when we make these arguments, which some of your friends might be making, free market is a great thing, Of course, free market is a great thing if free market happens. Free market never happens. In India, you are basically giving away the entire storage of grain to one business house and the entire retail chain to another business house. So it's basically moving into a duopoly. This is the Russian oligarchy which has consumed former Soviet Union. You're going the same way.
Yeah.
So the protests, I believe the government will have to repeal. It has to look for some honorable exit from this. We don't know what that will be, but that's really government's worry. My worry right now is that I think the last talks happened around 20th of January, and now for over 20 days there have been no talks, and there has just been greater and greater censorship from the government. This has to change. The government has to recognize the protesters as valid, with the same rights as any other citizen, and talk to them as equals. They cannot be persecuting the protesters.
Okay, Aman, great. Thanks so much. I think you gave so much context now for the people that are listening here. I doubt that anybody here in Germany has any kind of idea about the things you talked about, unless they are also directly connected. What I would like to finish with is, and I think it's especially great because you lived in Germany actually for 2 years, so you kind of know what our society is like. What can we in Germany, if we talk about the common struggle that we all face on this planet? We talked before about, right-wing shifts of governments and neoliberal pushes of economies. What can we in Germany learn from our fellow protesters and farmers in India? And what can we take from you in order to maybe help us also mobilize in a way that you give us such a great example?
Honestly, I'm no one to suggest, but I will share 2 observations that I had when I lived in Germany. One is when I would go on the Autobahn, I would see this vast farms, huge farms, wheat would be growing, corn would be growing.
Yeah.
And there would be 2 tractors in it. That's it. So the land holdings, I think a lot of people have already been evicted from their farm holdings.
Yes, that's true.
That is how these holdings have become large.
Yes.
What happened to those people who were evicted? Did they find good alternatives? Did they not find? We have a model like Taiwan, for example, where millions were taken out from paddy cultivation. But at the same time, industries were built, and within 2 decades, Taiwan became an Asian tiger. Not that it sorted out their issues, they still have issues, but there was a proper plan on how to shift populations. There is no such plan in India. I wonder if there is a plan like that in Germany. Germany has a reverse crisis, actually. And that is my second point. Germany has crisis of declining population growth.
True. Yes.
Yeah.
And
that is Germany's big concern. This loneliness that I experienced in Germany, this we not being connected to each other, we being connected to devices, or we being locked in our own individual flats or homes or whatever, that I think is debilitating for the mental health of people. Yeah. And that also leads to declining rate of growth. I mean, Merkel has been great in inviting the migrants from Syria, and all those steps like a few years back they were happening, which of course created a right-wing backlash in Germany as well. But the fact is that the factories of Germany need labor, and there is no labor happening in Germany.
That was actually one of the main motivations as why that happened in the first place.
Exactly. But something I have experienced, I have also been largely an urban person. And when I went down to research my book and live with these farmer unions or live with poorer farmers or with landless labor, I saw what these solidarities give them. They don't give them solutions to the large problem that is in front, because they know that the struggle is unending. There will be some greedy government, some greedy player all the time. But it gives them a sense of solidarity with each other. It gives them a sense of bonding, a sense of family, a sense of affection, love, friendship. That, I think, is what we should really learn from these big protests that are going on, whichever way they go. For 76th day today, the giant Hindutva propaganda machinery, they were doing everything through propaganda, through their IT cells, Twitter accounts. The entire media is sold out. That's why I love we are talking here, on independent media. All this has collapsed in front of these protests. Just by coming together.
Yes.
And that's the only message I have to give. We should come together. We should unionize. We should fight for rights. Heck, even Google has now, I think, a union in it. So you can imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
We reported on this. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I think that is essential. People have to stand up for their rights. And as long as we are divided and individual, corporations will continue to screw us. If we get together and fight together, we might get something out of it.
Excellent, Aman. I want to express all my thanks to you. We are so honored to have you here. It was so great to hear you talk about this.
Thank you so much.
Please, let's try to stay in touch, and maybe we can talk to you in the future about further developments there. And if I mean, it might not mean so much because we are not that big of a community yet here. But if it means anything, we would like to express all our solidarity with farmers' protests over there, and also with the work that you're doing. And thanks a lot for everything.
Dankeschön.
Dankeschön. All right, Aman, I will see you soon.
Yeah, auf Wiedersehen.
Bye-bye.